Thank you, Dr. Dalisay.
Butch na lang.
I know. No, this is the first time I ever called you
Oo nga.
Dr. Dalisay. But as always, since the first time I met you at the UP Writers Workshop in 1992.
92 pa ba yun?
Oh, 92.
My goodness.
It's always an honor to
Well, thank you.
to be with you. And you know this. No?
Thank
it's
you,
always
thank
an honor
you.
because unlike a lot of writers, you really are you're very brief with words, no? When you talk to people, no? And you have told me many times and other writers na you really treasure real friends, the people you break bread with. And
Yes.
those are your words.
Yes.
No? Na in this age of social media especially, no,
That's
na
right.
naging mas important sa iyo yung ganun. You're not on social media, no?
Well, Twitter lang.
Twitter, yes,
Yep.
you're in the worst place in social media, the noisiest place
I
in
know.
social media right now. Pero siguro to our generation of writers, and to all the future generations of writers, you stand out as a particularly important example because you have managed to put together a career that combines literary writing, unabashed literary writing, real literary writing, you know, and commercial writing,
Yes.
meaning writing films,
Yes.
writing biographies, writing
Yes.
commissions, you know, and you have dignified both. No, you have
thank you.
created a career out of both, and I know it's a career that nobody can do that career, can build a career like that accidentally. No?
Well, yes, I've often said that I write for a living. I've always written for a living. Even before I was writing as a kind of a literary person, nagsusulat na ako noon para maghanap buhay. Kasi maliit pa ako sa, it's a long and familiar sob story, but as I often tell people, I was the poorest kid in my school, sa grade school, sa Lasal, because my parents sent me there basically to infiltrate the middle class. Mahirap lang kami noon eh. So sumugal yung mga magulang ko, sabi nila, Butch, pasok ka natin dito sa eskwela ng mga mayayaman. Matuto kang mag-English, kaya ako naging Inglesero. And because of course, my classmates, I must say, were very, very kind to me. I have no trauma from that period. Let's get that clear. And probably it's to the credit of the LaSalle brothers that they made sure that I was treated fairly. But of course, there were certain things I couldn't do with my classmates. I couldn't really socialize with them on the level of, playing with little remote-controlled cars and yung mga uso nun eh. And so I became a bookworm instead.
You were from Romblon.
I was from Romblon. I was an island boy. I was born on a small seaside village in Romblon, pulled out of my mother's womb, by a comadrona. At the age of around 2 or 3, we moved to Manila. And then we had a bit of a bubble. I think my dad had a good job for a while, but that collapsed. And so I was stuck in LaSalle with all these rich kids. And as I often say, I've told this story many times before, but since this is the interview of my life, then I might as well say it again. I'd go to school with nothing but a loaf of tasty bread na walang palaman. So punit lang ako ng punit doon. And maybe a few centavos for a bottle of Coke. So ilang baon ko maghapon, pag uwi ko sa bahay, minsan wala akong nadadatnan doon kundi kanin at pulang asukal. Tapos pagpasok ko sa Lasal, syempre ibang kultura yon. So you can imagine that kind of dichotomy in my young life. But again, I did not develop any resentments. Ang ginawa ko, I figured out paano ako magsusurvive dito? And so, para sa akin, yung to take care of my loneliness, I became a bookworm. Binabasa ko lahat yung nasa library, and sometimes I'd finish 2 books in a day. My library card, nakapuro, ang bilis maubos na.
Ano mga libro na to?
Usually, of course, Hardy Boys, inubos ko lahat yun. And then when I was done with the Hardy Boys, surreptitiously, I began reading Nancy Drew. Wala nang mabasa. Histories, a lot of biographies. I enjoyed most also yung mga travelogue, science books, Wonder World of Science. So doon talaga bumakas yung mata ko sa how wide this and fascinating this world was. And of course, doon nag-develop yung desire ko na at someday mag-travel. I had this intense desire to see the world. We were living in Mandaluyong at that time. It's something I've also written about in my stories. But those books really liberated my imagination, and I wanted to be there. To places like Lapland or the Ukraine or wherever these
Exotic.
Yes, exotic locales, wherever these books took me to. I'm saying these stories because reading and writing became my coping mechanisms. Yung pagsusulat ko naman, nagsimula yon dahil nga sa kababasa ko ng Hardy Boys. Sabi ko, must have been like about 8 and 9. Sabi ko, magsulat kaya ako ng sarili kong Hardy Boys. So, kumuha ako ng bond paper, I folded it in the middle, tinahi ko yun. I sewed up the spine, which is why until today, marunong akong manahi. I mean, seriously, I can...
So that was your first published work, huh?
Hindi nga lang na-publish. So, tiniklop ko yung papel, tapos with a pencil, I began writing my own version of my Hardy Boys. Except na instead of Bayport, nasa Bonnie Avenue na ang setting ngayon. And that's where I think I first felt the magic of committing literally words to paper. And seeing something in your hands that you created. And from there, nagko-contribute na rin ako ng mga tula-tula sa school paper.
You said you were 8 or 9 years old?
Yeah. Oo. And I knew that writing and reading, I don't know kung naabutan niyo pa to, but we had something called the SRA.
Yes, of course. Those modules.
Yes, modules. Yeah, this SRA was a series of graded modules, and depending on your comprehension, you moved up a ladder of colors, and I thought that was really fascinating because you felt rewarded for reading and understanding things. So that was something I particularly enjoyed in my grade school years. So the reading was one way of compensating for whatever I thought I didn't have. But another more practical way of compensating myself, and this one in a literal sense, was that I began earning money by doing the homework of my classmates. Like one of them was a senator's son, and he would have me write up his science reports.
Is he a successful person now, or?
Well, he died recently, but I think he did pretty well later in life.
So you built his career.
Hindi naman. But I do these things, like, I'd write up the report for 50 centavos,
Sure.
which was a lot of money to me then.
Sure.
That was more than my baon, I think, for the day. So what that did was to make me associate writing with living, writing with surviving.
That's interesting.
This is how you can help yourself and even your family.
But before that, no, there is a gap or a gulf between being a reader and being a writer, and you
Yeah.
crossed that pretty quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
was it because you really sort of had the life of a mind? You had a great imagination when you read all those Hardy Boys books and Nancy Drew books. What made you cross over to being a writer from being a reader?
Because I felt that these things could or should happen where I was, where I was located. Bakit sa Bayport lang, diba? I mean, I was also,
Frank and Joe Hardy.
yes,
You know.
growing up on Bonnie Avenue, and I've written about this in a story called Cameo.
Yes.
Ang Mandaluyong noon, of course, bukid pa eh. Literally bukid. At sa hapon, pag uwi namin, kami ng kapatid ko, lalakad kami doon sa mga kogon, ganyan, mangongolekta ka ng mga, siyempre, mga buto-buto ng, ng damo, at we would look out. Minsan, inaabot kami ng Guadalupe, may mga kuweba doon na pinagpupugaran daw noon ng mga bayawak at pinagtataguan ng mga Hapon. And I'd find a rusted Japanese helmet.
Wow.
May mga quarry din doon, adobe quarry na which was filled with like lilies and lemna and all kinds of vegetation.
This is the 1960s.
1960s. And so, in other words, I was living in a place that invited adventure and imagination. And I wanted to capture that, kahit noon pa.
So you wanted to sort of build a world of your own.
Yes.
No?
Kasi mahilig din ako nung manood ng TV. Nakikipanood lang kami noon. Di ba, estilo nung wala naman kami sariling TV. So, sasabit ka doon sa bintana ng kapitbahay mo. Gabi ng ladim, mga aninong gumagalaw, as well as all the American TV shows. Of course, Bonanza, Ivanhoe, and this really fired my imagination. I thought that since stories were so much fun, I could have more fun by making up my own stories. And so when I think early on I had the feeling that writing was something that I enjoyed doing and that I could do perhaps with some level of competence. I think yung competence as far as reading and writing were concerned, I probably got some validation for that from my grades in reading and writing.
Sure, in LaSalle.
In LaSalle.
But English, no?
Yeah,
It was an English.
Yes,
It was an education in English. No?
Yes. Yeah, I must say that I was born in Romblon. Ang salita namin doon Romblomanon, and I could still speak some of that. But at home, I suppose we began talking in a mixture of Romblomanon and Tagalog. Hindi naman ako ini-English ng parents ko eh. Not like parents today, So all the English I learned was basically from school and from TV. And then came the point that I had to, when I was graduating from LaSalle, and my parents told me, Butch, wala na tayong, sorry to say, pero talagang we can't sustain you na sa LaSalle.
What age was this?
Well, this was when I was about 11 or between 11 and 12.
That's like grade 3.
Hindi, sa ano na to, nung napatapos na kami sa LaSalle na accelerate ako twice eh. Kaya nakatipid ako sa pera at sa panahon. Although yung isa acceleration na yun, the whole batch was accelerated. It was really hard going. All those 6 years from prep to grade 7 with the accelerations, every step of the way was really difficult. Like I was named best Boy Scout, for example, but I couldn't even pay for my uniform. I still keep the promissory note or the slip where Brother Alphonse is the principal, generously tells my dad, you know, he can have his uniform and you can just pay when you can. My brothers and sisters went to public schools. One of my brothers had to stop schooling for a while. And all of this was basically to keep me in LaSalle. So I firstborn ako eh. So I understood that responsibility. Na I wasn't there just to have fun. It wasn't just learning for learning's sake, but it was learning so that at some point I could help my family along.
Did you have an idea of what you wanted to be at that age?
Well, at that time, you know, like all boys or many boys, I of course wanted to be, you know, lots of things: a scientist, maybe an engineer, a pilot. Astronauts were big then. I remember the McGraw-Hill documentaries with these rockets flying into space, and Tom Swift, and of course I was part of that generation. So science was a big thing with me, which I suppose became handy because, as I was saying, there came a point when my parents told me, we can't keep you in LaSalle anymore for high school. But they said, but there's this new high school that just opened, and they offer free tuition, and even they give out stipends, so maybe you should take the exam. And I said, so what school is this? And you know, it was the Philippine Science High School, which was just in its, I think, we were applying for the third batch. And so, sabi ko, sige, kuha ko ng exam. So, this is where the SRA and all those things came in handy. Kasi hindi man ako nag-review or anything. I remember I took the exams dito sa St. Joseph College. And I just took it, went home. And much to my surprise, maybe a couple of months later, you know, my mom was jumping for joy, and she said, you know, Butch, you topped the exam, you know, 6,000 students, and I was number one, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was an okay student, maybe top 15% thereabouts, but I was never valedictorian or anything like that, and I didn't really go for those things.
Were you a competitive student?
Only in certain areas, of course, like reading and the SRA and things like that. Pero sa iba naman, alam ko, like math wasn't a particular interest for me. Now again, as I've often said, the funny thing, it's funny now, but funny thing was that after my first year in Philippine Science, I was going to get kicked out because my grade in English was 1.0, as I would have expected, but my grade in math was 5.0. So they said, you know, we should really kick you out. But I'm sure they couldn't do that just like that because I was their top-notcher. I mean, what would that say about their admissions policy or whatever?
And you were the premier batch.
We were the third batch. So sabi sa akin nung admin sa Philippine Science, why don't you write a letter of appeal to be put on probation? So maybe we can do that. So sabi ko, sige. So I sat down with my dad and we drafted a letter of appeal, which, it's funny, I think began with, at the outset, let me be clear that I bear malice towards none. You know,
Maybe that was the most important piece of writing you've ever done in your life.
I'm sure because it saved my skin. I was 12 years old and, you know, first big crisis of my life. So they let me stay on. I was under probation for the next 4 years, or 3.5, because I became editor of the school paper, I think, in my junior year. Yun lang so that became the story of my life. Near flunking some math, but always straight ones in English. And of course, at some point, I said, talagang, parang wala na akong alam gawin kundi magsulat. So
you were writing all through that time? I mean,
Yes.
on your own, as a hobby, as a, you know?
yes, I mean, I was writing stories, poems. At some point, I think when I was like maybe 14, without my knowing it, my teacher, my English teacher, Mrs. Agnes Vea, the mother of Goy and Ray Vea, must have submitted one of my poems to the graphic magazine. It was a little version of the graphic,
Yes.
and it got published there. So I was so surprised. Pwede pala to. But I was already also reading beyond my
Level.
then, things I couldn't understand, maybe still can't understand, because while I was at Philippine Science, lumipat na kami sa Pasig nito. We moved in about 30 years, we moved around the city, mga 15 places all around Metro Manila.
Why is that so? Why was that so?
Well, we never really owned a house until I was grown up.
What did your father do for a living?
My father, bless his soul, was kind of a jack of all trades, but on
In the 60s, that was
the
the thing to be, no?
But the jack of all trades on the clerical side. I
I
don't.
get what you
I
mean.
mean, he wasn't a mechanic or anything like that. My father was a very bright kid in Romblon. I don't think anyone from our province from that time will dispute this, that he was the brightest guy around. Top of his class and so on. And he wanted to be a lawyer, but he was too poor. They were too poor for him to finish law, and then he got married. Kaya he had to settle for clerical jobs. He was a clerk of public works. When he was about to be promoted, some political appointee got the position. So I think he resigned, and then he moved around some motor vehicles office. There was even one time he served as a jeepney barker.
Really, huh?
Nagpapasakay ng
Yeah.
ng jeep. Pero, and again, I've written about this, pero
Of
the
course.
one word that stuck in my mind from those days was dilhensya, kailangan dumilhensya. That he needed to find money from day to day para mabuhay kami.
And your mother was a housewife?
My mother was, this is the interesting part, my mother was actually a rich man's daughter
Wow.
in Romblon. She was
Wow.
the youngest of like 12 kids, the apple of her father's eye, the only one who went to UP. And then my father, who comes from this poor family, sweeps her off her feet. She taught for a couple of years in Romblon, UP education siya. She was very proud of that. Very proud of her UP degree, which was why growing up, we had a 78 RPM record of UP Beloved. The flip side was Push On UP. And she would play that for me nearly every day. I suppose telling me that, Butch, paglaki mo sa UP ka.
Well, for the record, we're here in Quezon Hall.
Yes. Yes, well,
In your great office in Quezon Hall.
yeah, I know. I mean, I don't think my mother would have ever dreamed that I would become vice president of UP. So she got her wish. I mean, I was indoctrinated into really gunning for UP.
This stayed on when you were in Philippine Science because...
Yes, even when I was in Philippine Science, lahat naman kami noon, wala kami iniisip kundi pumasok sa UP. Some of us, of course, went to Ateneo. A few even went to PMA.
But that is the track of Philippine Science talaga.
Yes.
Di ba?
Yes, UP talaga noon. Pero while I was at Philippine Science, I became editor of a school paper in my junior year. And it was then, I think, that one of my big brainwaves was to figure out that if we were so smart, why were we being kept in high school for 5 years? Kasi Philippine Science noon had a 5-year curriculum. Sabi ko, ba't ganun? Dapat 3, di ba? Well, this was helped along by the fact that I'd met this girl who will go unnamed in one of those high school press conferences, and I had a crush on her. And she was also a student editor, but she was graduating like a year or 2 ahead of me. So sabi ko, paano ko pa mahabol yun if I'm going to be stuck in high school? So because of that reason, among others, I campaigned for in fact, a 3-year high school. And it became...
It's always a girl, no?
Yeah, well, there's always a girl in the story. And and eventually, it gained momentum, and the school agreed that we would be cut down to 4 years. My batch, kasi kami yung in the middle, we were given the option to graduate in 4.5.
So this was your work, cutting it down?
Partly. I mean, it's a lot of people's work, but that was my contribution as editor. And so I graduated. I entered UP in October 1970, in time for the first quarter storm.
Yeah, what a time to enter UP.
But I'd had some preparation for that. Kahit sa Philippine Science pa lang, aktivista na kami noon. Although, of course, in the late 60s, malabo pa yung mga causes. I remember marching on Session Road in Baguio with all of these. I'm not sure if this was a National Secondary Schools press conference, but we were all these young high school kids marching, shouting student power.
As a high school kid?
Yeah. Ungawa, Ungawa, the students got the power. I remember.
This is every reader, I suppose, starts out as an escapist. You read Hardy Boys. You mentioned yourself. You read all these fantasy stories.
Yes.
And yet, your writing, and your life then was very grounded in reality. How did this, You never started out writing science fiction stories or fantasy stories or
no,
with your head in the clouds, you know what I mean?
Well, I not really, I think. I mean, I loved science fiction, actually.
Sure.
Especially when I was starting out. And I was reading the classic science fiction books. One author that continues to fascinate me for his science fiction is Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Of course.
The Barsoom, the Martian series.
Martian series, yeah.
In fact, I think a couple of years ago, I really looked for copies of yung mga Made of Mars and so on.
But you're a firm realist, and
yes,
you've inspired generations of realist writers.
Because I find more challenge in it. Even when I was starting out, I remember in high school, because of course I would write for the literary section as well, even if I was the editor. I remember writing a story about 2 grandfathers who were my grandfathers, and it was very realistic. I remember that because one of my upperclassmen who was already in Ateneo kind of asked me to borrow it to submit to his class in English.
That happens a lot.
So sabi ko, sige. So, I was always writing in that realist mode. Well, Hardy Boys is a realist, so ganyan ako mag-isip. What is it around me that needs to be figured out? Ganyan.
And it seems that, realist writing, especially in your case, I think is an act of memory. No? You write your father into it. You said you wrote about your grandfather.
Yes. Yes, it's recovering all of these threads. I think that I lost when we moved to the city, and when we moved around the city, constantly rebuilding literally our homes and our lives. Yan ang memory ko ng childhood ko. Lahat ng mga gamit namin nasa likod ng truck. Diba? Yung dresser ng nanay ko, yung refrigerator. And they kind of keep deteriorating with every move.
Sure. Yeah.
It was only much later that, and I was already married and a father then, when my father finally earned enough for us to move into 2 adjacent bungalows in San Mateo. Pero mga around 1978 na siguro yun. I mean, that
Things settled then.
that late. Oh,
Because I know for a fact that, going back to college,
yeah.
you were an activist.
I was an activist.
You were imprisoned.
Yes. I entered the Nationalist Corps. I said, when I have these ambitions in my mind. So pagpasok ko pa lang sa UP, sabi ko, there are 3 things I want to do. One is to enter the Nationalist Corps, which was kind of a feeder for KMNSDK. Yeah. The other was to enter the Collegian, which I also did in my first semester, and join the Alpha Sigma fraternity, which I also did in my first semester.
That made you a complete UP person.
Oh, so you think feeling UP talaga ako. Again, remember, I was indoctrinated na talagang pasok ko sa UP, and so.
And there was the left was a real. They were professional revolutionaries.
Oh yes,
then,
yes. It was very attractive. It was very powerful. Yeah. I should add, by the way, that I entered UP as an industrial engineering major.
I didn't know that.
Oh. Because I still had these vague notions, despite all of my 5s in math, and then I still had this glimmer of hope in me na baka pwede naman ako maging scientist of some sort. I actually didn't know what industrial engineering meant. I imagined this guy standing on top of the factory floor and just ordering people around. Move this here and do this there.
That's a capitalist
vision.
By the way.
So that didn't last long. Because again, after one semester in UP, my grade in English was 1, my grade in math was 5. This time, dahil naman sa kayabangan, dahil hindi ko pinapasukan yung klase ko, sabi ko, Philippine Science ako eh. I did integral calculus like in my junior year. Bakit ako papasok sa math? Ano ba yun, 17 or math 14? Doing
Basic algebra, no?
Doing algebra again. So, na 5. And so, at that point, I kind of had to realize that, no, you're never going to be a scientist. And then, of course, well, things really went crazy from that point on. Talagang pumasok na ako sa Kilusan. I was there kind of like a Forrest Gump of activists, because I was there when Francis Sontiliano was killed. I was there when Pastor Messina, Sonny Messina was shot.
Diliman Commune.
Diliman Commune. I was here during the whole Diliman Commune. And I really have to thank my parents for the fact that they never dissuaded me. They respected what I was going through.
And did you go through this whole thing? I mean, sort of, people go through a transformation and they start, embracing the ideology and.
Well, I read this book, and this is the book to blame, I guess, in high school pa lang, which is The Forest by William Pomeroy. So when people ask me what's the most influential book in your life, I have that very ready answer. It was The Forest by Pomeroy. And because it was so well written, so lyrical, that I felt that, this was the noble, heroic life. And I was driven by that. And along with Chairman Mao and his little red book, which I still have a copy of, by the way, I really felt that I was among the chosen, among those people who were going to sacrifice their lives for a better country. And I believe that 100%. And so
And you dropped out of college,
I dropped
right?
out. I dropped out, much to my mother's dismay. You can imagine the disappointment then, although there were no big dramatic scenes. And again, I really, really thank my parents for that. During the Diliman Commune, they would sneak in food to us, but they never told me, "Muwi ka na." You know?
Even if people got shot there,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Well, to be fair, we were living just across the fence,
Yeah.
literally.
Literally.
Kasi naghirap na naman kami noon. Nung pumasok ako sa UP as a freshman, we were squatters dito sa Tandang Sora. I mean, literally.
I mean, you mean that literally.
Literal squatters, as in, ito yung mga lean-to na bahay, ano, na dinagdag lang dun sa isa nakatayong bahay na yung bubong mo may gulong sa taas, ano? Ganong klaseng, ano, di ba? Mga cliche ng...
Did you resent your father for...
No, not at all.
No?
No, my father was the most loving person. We went through a lot of hardship because of some bad decisions he made. He was also an inveterate gambler, and that would rub off on me. You know, kaya kung basahin mo yung story ko na some families very large,
yeah.
that's my dad.
Yeah.
That's my dad. No matter what happened, I looked up to him. He was also a very good writer, by the way, and a very good and a very sharp reader. So kahit na mahirap kami, our house was always full of books and magazines.
So it was an
Reader's
uncommon
Digest.
household, no? It was an uncommon
In that way,
growing
siguro,
up.
in that way, there was a lot of emphasis on education as your salvation. Kaya yung mga sisters ko, ayun mga nerds. Talagang talagang nakatutok sa libro yun. And sila yung mga nagvaledictorian, salutatorian. Because they really understood that they had to study for their lives.
But then you dropped out.
And then I dropped out. And so that was...
Why did you drop out?
Because I felt that I had a higher calling in the movement as a propagandist.
But did you call yourself a communist or consider yourself one?
Yes, I did at that time. It was an honor then among activists. So I dropped out, and then, but during this time, I must say, I also began writing in Filipino, which I did not know how to do when I was in high school. Hindi pa ako nagsusulat sa Pilipino noon.
And it was not your first language.
No, it's not my first language either. Pero natuto na rin ako kasi, again, because of the political imperative, we had to, reach the masses, and this was the language of the masses. So nagsusulat na ako ng mga manifesto na ganyan sa Pilipino. And that would serve me in good stead later on.
As a screenwriter and a playwright.
Professionally, yes. So I was the martial law. I was here when martial law was declared, and
Still a student, no, at the time.
hindi na reporter na ako.
Okay.
Because at some point,
You were a reporter for...
well, what happened was I was a freshman, pero typically mga barkada ko sa collegian and so on, mga seniors. My first girlfriend, it's funny, but I was 17. My first girlfriend was an MA student.
Okay. She was committing a crime, in other words.
She was also a very precocious graduate student. I think she was a graduate student at 19.
Okay.
Summa cum laude yan sa Siliman.
Okay.
Noon. So this is another of my, sabi ko, how am I ever going to catch up with her? Graduate na siya at lahat. Kasama ko siya sa collegian noon.
Okay.
But what happened was that, so I was hanging out with all of these seniors and big men on campus. Tapos graduate na sila, naghanap pa sila ng trabaho. Nag-apply na, yan, sa Manila Times, Chronicle, and so on. So sabi ko, ano ba to? I mean, I think I can write as well as these guys. but I'm going to be left behind here. You know? So sabi ko, di apply na rin ako sa Alimpusa. You know? I tag along, ganyan.
Sure, while you were enrolled in industrial engineering.
Oh, actually, baka by this time, palagay ko parang nag-drop out na rin ako eh.
Okay.
But I tagged along. This is around 1971, late 1971, early 72. So 18 na ako nito, 18. And I remember going up to Armando Doronila at the Chronicle and asking for a job. And he said, "How old are you?" I said, "Well, I'm 18. So he said, "Well, why don't you come back in like 3 years?" But I didn't let that discourage me. I finally found an editor in the Philippines Herald, which was a very respectable newspaper at that time, small but with a long history.
Sure.
So there was this city editor named Nemesio Dacanay who said, so must have been such a pest that to get rid of me, he said, "Okay, here's what we'll do." He said, "Where do you live?" I said, "Quezon City." He said, "Sige, bumalik ka sa Quezon City, come back in 3 days with a story, and I'll take a look at it." I said, "Wow, okay, this is the opportunity of my life." So I went back to Quezon City, of course, not having taken one unit of journalism or anything. So sabi ko, "So where's the story?" I remember walking around the elliptical road, the oval, and
Looking first.
waiting for an accident to happen. Sabi ko, "Lord, give me an accident, or I hope a plane drops out of the sky." Para may istorya ako.
But you had decided by this time that writing was going to be,
Oo. In fact, I decided that early on. I remember when I flunked my math.
Sure.
It's Philippine
you
science.
flunked several times, in fact, even in
Oh.
college, no?
Pero nung pa lang sa Philippine science, after my first year, when I flunked, I remember this. Nasa Pasig kami noon. I was telling my dad noon, I don't think I'm going to be anything but a writer. Because that's the only thing I
So
really...
your choice of a science course was a practical choice.
Well, it's kind of just a tip of the hat, or,
Or because you knew it was a quota course, tough course to get into.
maybe it's just trying to prove something that,
Sure.
Pero...
But you knew already na.
My heart wasn't really in it.
Yeah.
But,
Writing was...
I always knew writing was my fallback. This was something that would sustain me for life. I knew that.
As a livelihood as
As a
well.
livelihood. Kasi sa high school pa rin lang, I remember one of my first job that ever got me any money was when my friend, whose dad was CEO of an insurance firm, they needed, I think, a featured story for their newsletter. And so I wrote the story, and I think I got paid 50 pesos for that.
It's a lot of money.
Pwede na yun. And then I joined the Zonta Club essay writing contest about the Manila Aquarium. And this, of course, was open to like everybody. And I was still in high school, and I won that. So I figured, hey, writing can get you places. Oh, and high school pa rin pala ako. Again, before we jump into UP, I was a senior, and we had this drama class with Lorly Villanueva. And so we became apprentices of sorts at PETA. This is another big break in what would become my career.
Sure.
This whole magical summer of 1970 at PETA. And so I learned all the aspects of theater, from stagecraft to lighting to a bit of acting, and then of course playwriting. And then I remember going to the PETA office one day and looking at a stack of what turned out to be scripts. And I was leafing through them. These were scripts for Balintatao, which was, of course, a leading drama anthology of that period on Channel 5. It was the first time I'd met a script. And I said, ganito pala ito. May video, may audio. You know, ganito pala ito. So sabi ko, so I borrowed a copy and I went home and I wrote up my own teleplay. You know, it was titled Bethlehem. It's about a street urchin or a kid who's picked up by a couple of, by a poor couple, you know, yung mga magbobote. I remember this is Joe Gruta and Angie Ferro. It got shot. Ginamit nila.
Yung ginawa mong
Yung ginawa ko script, sinabit ko. Tinanggap nila. Si Roderick Paulate was the kid.
Really? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And they paid me 250 pesos for that. So I was 16. You know, It was 1970.
What did you spend it on?
I think I bought a jacket.
Yeah.
I remember that. You know, so sabi ko, yeah, I mean, this just proves the point that writing pays. So eto, nung pinagawa na ako nung nandun na ako sa Philippines Herald, so pinaghahanap nga ako ng assignment, wala akong mahanap
Quezon
for
City,
3 days. Pagod na ako. Pumasok ako dito sa Delta Theater noon. I saw this to cool off, and then I saw this movie which was so bad. So I wrote up a review, brought it to the editor. He said, "Uy, okay ito, you're hired." So that was my break into newspapering, because I think they soon realized.
Not as a journalist, but as a columnist, actually, huh?
Well, hindi,
As a reviewer.
Hindi, it's kind of, I became a jack of all trades doon, because my first real assignment there, when they realized that I could write, they sent me to Nestor Mata, who was, of course, a very respected journalist.
And feared, no?
Yes, and feared. He was the features editor. So they send me to him, and he sees my copy, and he says, "You see this? This is page 5. This is a features page. This is your job. Fill up half that page every day."
That's how many words?
It's like, you know, it's like 1,000 words every day. So, you know, this is a case of, you know, be careful what you wish for.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Did you think, no, I've become a hack? Did you ever?
well, I always knew that I would write for a living, no matter what it took. So sa akin, I wasn't even thinking of it as hacking or no.
You enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. This is what I asked for. So just fill up half of page 5 every day.
And you were making a living.
And I was making,
You didn't need your college.
it was
degree.
it was really a good living, because at that time, this is 1972, I think my salary was like 1,200 pesos a month, which was enormous.
Yeah, you were no longer a communist as well, I think.
No, I was still in the movement.
Okay.
I was still in the movement, but much less active
Sure.
na. Hindi pa ako kinukulong nito. And then, so I became a full-time reporter.
Okay.
At that time, I think I was very likely the youngest full-time reporter in Manila. And word kind of got around that there's this young guy in the Herald who writes pretty well. So inalagaan nila ako, meaning they kind of built me up by knowing that I had no academic background. Ginawa nila akong general assignments reporter.
You became a golden boy for,
Yeah,
you know, for
something like that, I suppose, because they put me through. Sabi nila, we'll send you 2 weeks ka dito sa City Hall, 2 weeks of sports, 2 weeks of police. And so
all
on.
these beats.
Yes, and that was my real education.
Were you doing creative writing at the same time?
The last thing I'd written before then was a play for PETA. I was doing plays in Filipino. I was not writing short stories in English. I did a bit of that, of course, in high school. But basically, nung nasa college ako, tumigil yung creative writing for journalism.
Okay.
I became a full-time journalist.
Okay.
And this is also why, to me, there is no hierarchy of talent
Sure.
or vision for me among journalists and creative writers.
But I think also the realism part of your writing really
Yeah,
was...
I was right there in the middle of the story.
Couldn't have gotten more real than that. No?
Oh, yeah, especially as a police beat where we would deal with corpses and blood and again, this was what I asked for. So I was living the life at 18.
And you were supporting your family, I
I
suppose.
was helping my family. And then, of course, martial law happened. And when dito nga nangyari yun, I was in UP and I was covering a rally, actually. And then bigla nagputukan dito sa what turned out to be Iglesia ni Cristo, which was being raided by the Metrocom. And then I called the office to say, I have a scoop. Ako lang nandito ngayon, barilan sa UP. Sabi nila, wala na tayong dyaryo, tinututukan na rin kami dito. And that's how I discovered that martial law had been declared. So I went underground, kind of underground, actually.
But you didn't join the armed struggle, no?
No, although I had a feeling that at some point that was an option. I
Sure.
could have been called.
Okay.
Nagmi-meeting pa rin kami noon eh. We had groups. I was kind of semi-legal because, so nung nagsara yung dyaryo, because I had moved from the Herald, I resigned during a strike. I sympathized with the, hindi ako member
So there was a union?
There was a union, hindi ako miyembro ng union, but I turned in my sympathy resignation, and much to my surprise, tinanggap.
They called your bluff.
Oh, they called my bluff, God damn it. I wrote this really nasty letter pa
Yeah, sure.
to the editor, complaining about capitalism and all that. Parang caps and lowercase. Abay tinanggap, so I was out of a job,
Yeah.
my nest egg was gone.
Yeah.
Pero I moved to Taliba. Mabuti na lang, marunong na ako magsulat ng Filipino. No? So I moved to Taliba. And that's where martial law caught me. Kasi nga, I met all these reporters. We were covering I was a suburban correspondent. Makati was one of my beats. And yung buong barkada namin ng mga reporters sa Makati, kinuha kami lahat ni Mayor Yabut. Sabi
Dinampot kayong lahat.
Oh, dinampot kami lahat. Sabi, wala kayong mga trabaho, bigyan ko kayong trabaho dito. Tawag sa amin, Mayor's Performance Team, which meant, it's a sinecure, which meant that we were on the payroll. Ang trabaho lang namin noon ay mag-check ng mga attendance ng mga Metro 8 sa Makati tuwing umaga. So, palipat, may kanya-kanya kaming barangay doon.
Sistema talaga. No?
Mag-check lang kami ng mga attendance. And for the rest of the day, we would play chess and have a massage sa mga massage parlor ng Makati. 5 piso lang ang masahe nun. And so, again, it was kind of, it was weird.
No,
it was weird. And I was still in the movement, but this thing was going on. So, and then, pero may mga kasama din ako noon na pinupuntahan ko sa mga UG House. And in fact, there was a UG House na lahat ng kasama ko noon. Patay na o, desaparecido na ngayon. Because they were high-ranking party members. And then I decided to go home for Christmas. And nakipag-inuman ako sa isang neighbor who turned out to be an informant, an intelligence ano na pala, informant, asset. And so January 3rd, 1973, I woke up to the sight of a carbine pointed in my face.
Literally, yeah.
Yes. My father woke me up and may nakatutok na sa akin. And so there were like 8 people in our little dampa. Ano? Itong tinitira namin talagang dampa yun. Na may pinapalaki pa kami baboy doon sa batalan. Kaya maliligo kami katabi kang baboy. It's that kind of place.
Sure.
So nagsiksikan kami lahat doon, and so they arrested me, brought me to ISAF, Intelligence Service, AFP. And to cut a long story short, I was later moved to Bikutan, sa Ipil Rehabilitation Center, and then they moved me to the maximum security prison for some reason that I still don't understand. So, tinatawag na Youth Rehabilitation Center, YRC, where they really kept hardcore people like the Lava
The Lava Brothers.
Yes, si Jose Lava was there. No, Jesus Lava, rather.
Which who you wrote about
Yes,
later on, no?
And I played basketball with him then, not knowing I'd be writing his biography years down the road. Again, it's a story that I've told in Killing Time in the Warm Place, many aspects of it. I got released in August '73 after 7 months, and this is a kind of a Kafkaesque moment because I'm having taking a shower, and then I hear my name on the PA system. Dalisay, come to the guardhouse, and I thought, oh boy, they're going to beat me up again, because that's what happened the last time I was called there. Katuwaan ako, binugbog ako. So sabi ko, bugbogan na naman ito. But when I got to the guardhouse, I met this army captain who had a stack of papers, and he pulled out my sheet and he said, Dalisay, you're still here. And I said, yeah, I've been here 7 months. And he said, well, pack your bags because we have nothing on you. Wala ka namang kaso. So,
Kafkaesque.
so I went home, and the first thing I did was to go to the AS steps. And it was so deathly quiet. And I knew at that moment that I was never going to, at least at that time, that I was not going to return to school, because this wasn't the UP I knew. So again, so what happens, to backtrack a bit, in martial law prison, I had joined an artists group. This was another thing that I had been cultivating. I'd always had an interest in art and drawing. So meron kaming artists group noon, led by the printmaker Orly Castillo. And so, having no job, there's no more newspapers, I became a printmaker. And the Printmakers Association of the Philippines was then based in Malate, in Ermita. And I was working there with the likes of, learning from the likes of Ben Cobb and Tiny Nuida, and a lot of really, really first-rate artists.
But you were writing as well, or?
At that time, no, I wasn't doing any writing.
Okay.
I was really just...
So may hiatus talaga after you were imprisoned, no?
a few years. In fact, I worked as a printmaker, I think, for a couple of years. I was doing prints. I still have a few of them. Kasama nga ako dito sa retrospective ng PAP
I didn't know that.
a couple of months ago.
Really, huh?
Oo. I would make these prints, and we would sell them wholesale to a dealer who bought them for like 15, 20 pesos each. Basically, literally as space fillers for frames.
Okay.
It was really the frame she was selling,
Yeah.
but it had to have something in it. So,
It's like hotel artwork.
yes. So, maganda naman, kaya nga lang, yun ang gamit. No? So we sold, I lived off printmaking for a while, but I'm telling this story because this was where I met my wife-to-be, June Poticar, who was an activist here in UP.
And an artist.
Yes, she was from the fine arts. I'd seen her here before, and I thought, hey, that's a pretty girl, but she's a senior, so she won't give me the time of day. But when I saw her again, BAP, that kind of revived my interest in her. And so, niligawan ko siya, we got together. After 3 months, I proposed marriage. And the reason for this is that, you know, our friends were dying all over the place if they weren't already dead. I mean, it's the first quarter storm at Buhay. We never thought we'd hit 30.
How old were you when you got married?
On my 20th birthday.
20.
She didn't even know that I was just, you know. She was a few years older than me. I had to get my parents to sign a piece of paper allowing me to get married. But before that, so I told my mother, I'm going to get married. And she said, Raul, I don't even have a job. So the next day, I went back to PAP, and I was walking around Padre Faura when I bumped into an old friend from the Herald, June Medina, who was the chief of economic information at NEDA. And he said, uy, naghahanap kami ng feature writer dito. Would you like to apply? And I said, yeah, sure, sige. And again, so I got the job for 700 pesos a month, which wasn't too bad.
It's not bad at all.
Not bad in 1974, or 73 rather. So that same night, I went home and told my mom, I have a job, so I'm getting married. So we got married in January 1974, just as I turned 20. And the reason I'm telling this NEDA story is that that's where my writing was revived again. Because one of my closest friends there was Boy Noriega, who was also we became the Sikat boys. Jerry Sikat was our boss, and I still look up to him as one of my really most important mentors. Maybe not in writing, but in other things.
And I don't think I've ever heard you talk about your mentors in writing.
Yes.
You probably did not have any, no?
Well, maybe not in the kind of fiction that I do.
Sure.
Although I did admire several writers in particular. These would be Bienvenido Santos and Gregorio Brillantes, most particularly. But among mentors for other things, I've always counted Jerry Sikat, maybe in terms of life mentors. These would be Jerry Sikat, Johnny Gat Bonton.
Yes.
Because later on he would become my mentor in speech writing. And I suppose Lino Broca.
Really?
I must say.
As a storyteller, no?
Yes, and I mean as a screenwriter. Because while I was NEDA, this is really where my writing took off.
When you say took off, you started writing
I started
your short
writing,
stories and your...
First, I started writing plays again. Because Boy was there, and we were extremely competitive. We were the closest of friends. We were fraternity brothers. He was like a couple of years older than me. But siya lang nakakausap ko noon tungkol sa pagsusulat eh. We literally shared the same office. We were seated at adjacent tables. We would pound away at our CCP playwriting entries, side by side. Ganon.
Using office hours, during office
I suppose. I was writing Madilim ang Gabi sa Laot. He was writing Ramon Reyes ng Forbes Park. And then when the results came in, I was number 1, he was number 2. Ma'am Bonifacio was number 3. I think she's both our teacher. But that was the only time I beat Boy in playwriting. And lahat sinasalihan namin, CCP, Palanca, And subsequently, he would always beat me in playwriting. And this is important because that's one of the reasons why I turned to fiction in English, to get away from Buhay.
That's interesting.
Sabi ko, I'm sick of, of coming second or third.
Sort of calculated retreat. No?
Oo, hanap tayo ng ibang magagawa.
But ito pa isa, of course, playwriting, Tagalog, no? It's Tagalog, no? And then, but your fiction is English. Was that a choice, or you don't have you didn't have a choice because English talaga yung training mo when it came to prose?
English talaga naman yung pagbabasa ko eh. You see, the thing is, and this is still true today, I can't write decent fictional prose in Filipino. Kulang ako sa vocabulary. I don't have the range of choices that I have in English. Like even just to describe this room, I don't have the words for the textures, the colors. Again, those intangibles na para sa akin ang daling hulihin sa English. And I'm really sorry about that. Pero
that's interesting. When you say you're really sorry about it, it's because
I would have wanted to.
We both write in English, and yet we both write scripts in Tagalog. No?
Yes.
We know how removed English is from the Filipino experience.
Yes.
So you're aware of that, and
yes.
When you say you're sorry,
I'm sorry because I really want to write fiction in Filipino.
Okay.
But I don't want to write that fiction. So hindi ko na ginagawa. Sa English na lang. Hindi ba, ang isa kasi sa mga teorya ko about writing in English is that it's precisely that distance, that separation between the language and the thing that makes for art, because it's always a process of approximation.
Yes.
Hinahabol mo eh. Doon sa kahabol mo, doon nangyayari yung art.
Doon mo nakukuha.
Oo. Kaya that for me is really the heart of writing in another language. It's this constant effort to capture the thing, which will never really happen, but in the process you catch other things.
Yes.
And keep suggesting the thing.
Yes.
At yan ang maganda.
And that's prose, no? Because
yes.
you just keep at it until and something happens while you're doing it.
Yes. So it's never the thing itself. And actually, if it's the thing itself, then corny na eh. No? Yung kahabol ang masaya at exciting. So this time that I'm in NEDA, I'm still writing plays in Filipino. But now I'm beginning to cultivate my prose in English. And this is where 1975, I win my first palanca with a short story in English. And then I lose for 4 straight years. And then I hit my stride with stories like Old Timer and Heartland, and then I know that this is really what I want to do.
Did Iowa happen during this time?
I never went to Iowa.
You never did. You had a postgraduate education in the U.S.
Well, I got a graduate because what happened, I think, in '84. Around that time, hindi panahon 86 pala, 85 to 86. 85, so I graduate from UP in '84.
Finally.
No, and of course my mom is in tears when I graduate. I'm 30 years old when I graduate. And by the way, Boy Noriega and I had made a friendly pact or challenge that we would both have our first books out by 30. So I just barely made it, December '84. 30 years old na ako, siya rin. I think that year, but I think this was Bayan Bayanan. Boy, I must say, he was one of my mentors. I still keep his letters to me because he was my eye to the world. Kasi ako undergraduate ako. Again, when I entered NEDA, I had 21 units of college to show. It got to the point na because of my background din, dahil nahuli ako, I had a problem with security clearance.
Sure.
And what Jerry Sikat did, sabi niya, they're after you. I'm to cool off, I'm sending you to school in UP, learn some economics. This is actually the graduate school, development economics, which is now an MA course. So he signed me in as a special student. So I actually got my sort of graduate diploma ahead of my AB. What happened then was that when Ninoy was assassinated, wala na rin si Jerry Sikat noon from NEDA. I really had no reason to stay there anymore. So during my last years in NEDA, I began, ano pala nangyari? Dumaguete. Sikat sent me to the States. He's really this nice visionary guy. He had me learn economics, and then he said, "You've never been abroad, so I'm sending you to the States."
So he saw something in you. Huh?
Yes. And until today, I'm thankful to him for that. And when he sees me, he says, "Oh, you were one of my my best projects." He sent me to the States in 1980. He said, "I want you to see a bit of the world out there. I have this power to send you on a
midnight appointment.
On a U.S. aid grant ito."
Okay.
So he sent me there. So I spent some time in the States, in Michigan State, actually, and in Washington, D.C. And I enjoyed being on campus so much that I said, I really want to go back to school. Pagbalik ko sa Pilipinas, tiempo naman, the Siliman workshop was inviting people. Nag-apply ako, I got taken in. And that really sealed my decision to go back to school. This is 1981. So I began, I think, in 81, I began going back to school. It was this magical, again, moment when I was on the boat with Cesar Ruiz Aquino, and he stood up on the low table in our cabin, going to Dumaguete, and began reciting Robert Graves. I said, "This is fantastic, because I want more of this." And that whole summer, it was really just that. It was Robert Graves. It was Dylan Thomas. It was actually the poetry that attracted me back. Just the magic of the language. So sabi ko, gusto kong gawin ito. So Ineda noon, thankfully, was here in Quezon City. We had been reassigned here, so I reapplied to go back to UP. I chose between history and English. The fact is, I really wanted history, and I've always had this lifelong interest in history. Pero sabi ko, mas madali kung matatapos ito sa English. So for practical reasons, I went back to school and became an English major, and really racked up the units. Pinapayagan naman nila ako because I was a mature student. So in fact, I think in my last semester, I took 27 units or something like that.
That's like more than a human person can bear. No?
Ano naman kaya ko naman at that point. So nag-graduate ako, November 84, and I immediately joined the English department na. I resigned pala from NEDA a year earlier.
Sure.
and Beng took over. And again, I must really, really thank Beng for allowing me to do that. She said, I have a job naman. She had a job with SGV. You finish up, then you do what you really want to do. So she sustained us for a year. And then 84, I joined the faculty. And by this time, medyo marami-rami na na rin yung mga napanalunan ko. In 85, I saw this flyer for the Fulbright program. Just kind of casually, nakita ko lang, nakapaskil, nakamimyo nga lang yun. I applied for it, I got taken in for a master's in Michigan, and then tinuloy-tuloy ko na yun sa PhD sa University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And that's where I wrote Killing Time in a Warm Place and Sarcophagus and Other Stories. And so by this time, I was really on track as a fiction writer. But I must also add that years before, around 1978, I began writing for film again after Balintatao, because I'd also kept a foot in drama, in the theater. And it was in PETA where I met Lino Broca. And he took me in to write for his Lino Broca Presents, which was a drama anthology. And so that gave me my break into film. Ano, ginawa na namin sunod-sunod yan, yung Ang Mananaya with Chanda Romero, Tana Empoy with Nina Mulak, and Hayop sa Hayop with Hilda Coronel, and that just became a string of what eventually became 14 movies, I think, with Lino.
But you were never sort of sucked into that world, no?
No. I mean, I never became like a showbiz person. And
you never settled for the screenwriter's life, no? Which
no. Because the screenwriter's life then was miserable.
It was. It remains sometimes to be really.
I guess.
miserable.
I mean, I've been out of touch, pero noon talaga kasi ang pagsusulat sa pelikula, alam ko na malaking. It was a great honor, of course, to see your name up there in the credits, even if you're the only one, cheering.
And there's certainly more fame to it than writing fiction. I mean, before, right?
Tsaka siyempre, yung idea na yung trabaho mo, mapapanood ng milyon-milyong tao. So malaking bagay yun. But again, in terms of earning a living, ang unang pelikula ko noon, bayad sa akin, 10,000 pesos eh. Which of course was still a lot of money in 78. Pero madalas din mangyari na hindi ako nababayaran. Itong lahat ng mga inihinagpis na mga manunulat na, lalo na sa pelikula na nasuba ako. Nangyari sa akin yan. I remember lining up with the extras and the stuntmen doon sa opisina ng isang producer diyan siyempre dito sa Escolta. Doon naman sila lahat. Hanggang alas 5 ng hapon. Tapos sasabihin sa'yo, bumalik ka na lang bukas. Ganyan. It got to the point na naoperahan kasi si Beng noon eh. Na talagang galit na galit ako noon. I really wrote a nasty letter to the producer. Which I suppose hit a raw nerve because I think I got paid after that. Pero ganun kahirap.
But fiction didn't pay anything either, right?
No, but as far as I was concerned, I didn't sweat as much as I did for working on screenplays. Kasi yung mga screenplay talaga noon, tsaka makanilyado pa lahat ito.
Juggernaut yun eh.
Oo. Madugo physically, emotionally, yung pagsusulat ng screenplay. At nangyayari nga yan more than once. May isang kilalang director hindi ko na papangalanan, namatay na rin siya. And he was working on this project that I really, really admired noon. So sabi ko, I'd give my right arm to work for this guy. And he must have heard about that because he took me on as a kind of an apprentice. I admired his moodiness and all that. So he said, sige, bibigyan kita ng break. Gawin mo tong pelikula. Sulatin mo tong script. And I wrote the script. And then I rewrote the script a couple of times. And then sinut na niya. And then when I was asking for my payment, sabi ba naman sa akin, bakit may pinag-usapan ba tayo? Ganon, ano? So I really realized that a screenwriter's life was not going to sustain me that way.
But did you also get more satisfaction out of your fiction?
Oh yes, of course, because, and I say this often, and especially because I come from that background in theater and film writing. When you write fiction, you're the director, the cinematographer, the star, the set designer. You know, you're all of these. So you're the editor. All of these is under your control. And that's what's wonderful about it. Nobody's going to tell you, do this.
And yet your audience is a fraction of...
Is a fraction,
No.
but...
I'm sure you weighed that and you thought about that. And so what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I have a clear audience in mind, but it's an audience of quality, not quantity.
Yeah. Sometimes it's your fellow writers.
It's my fellow writers, first of all, that I want to read my work. I remember that there was a time when I was an undergrad that whenever I would finish a new story, I would slip it under the door of Franza Celiana, who was another of my mentors. I mean, he and his style and mine couldn't be more different, but again, in that...
He had a very generous heart, no?
Yes, he's extremely generous. Also literally generous. He'd keep giving me things, like books and, little things. He really took me under his wing. He was actually my thesis advisor for my undergraduate thesis. My undergraduate thesis was on Boy Noriega. And it was Franz who was my advisor. But he would be the first person I would show my new stories to. And I would be sitting on pins and needles until his comments would come back. And I think it really made my day, for example, when I showed him a story titled The Other Side, which was about a driver of mine who had died. And Franz, in that squiggly scrawlages, wrote magnificent. So that's what you lived for, the validation of writers you looked up to. I shouldn't forget Franz was one of my most important.
And he was a really good reader.
He was a good
reader. Was a good reader, no? So he had a very different style.
Yes.
You could not imitate him, no? But,
No.
Pero he really knew where you were coming from all the time, no?
That's right. And, in his later years, he would speak in this very cryptic, oracular sort of way that you really couldn't figure out. You knew you were being told something important. And Franz also had his moods and would fly into an indescribable rage sometimes. But he was very kind. He understood, I think, that writing, and especially writing well, was not an easy thing to do. So you had to take care of those people who tried to do that.
Speaking of that, no, the writer's life is not an easy life to put together, no, or to hold together, no. And you're one of the very few examples of people who can hold together a writing life well. I mean,
well, again, because I never forget where my supper comes from. That to me is basic. I write to feed my family, our extended family. But of course, it's more than the physical or financial aspect, which I respect a lot. It gives me all kinds of. It's really not just. It's not just relief. It's redemption,
It's interesting.
and that's what I think we really go for in the end, especially when we've led such screwy lives.
Are you? Like, you mentioned redemption, and that's a big word.
Yes.
I mean, over all other words. So.
Yes, yes.
Are you haunted by?
There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things I have to be sorry for.
Yeah.
And I think whenever I write something good, I feel a little better about myself. It's not forgiving myself, but it's offering something in restitution.
Sure.
Nah, I mean, to leave something better behind.
Sure.
And that to me is a big part of writing. A lot of my writing, I think I might have said this before, but a lot of my writing is actually, I think, driven by guilt.
Sure. I notice also from reading on your work that a lot of your writing portrays the contact, or the encounter between the classes.
Oh yes.
Some families very large, all of these things.
Oh
no?
yes, yes.
In fact, it's funny that you mentioned earlier that you were sent to LaSalle to infiltrate the middle class.
Yes.
In many ways, the middle class has now infiltrated you.
Oh yes, yes. I mean, I certainly don't deny it, and I actually see it as a point of pride that I'm a middle class person today.
Social mobility is certainly, for a writer to achieve financial and social mobility,
yes,
is something to be proud of, no?
Yes, but I have this real affinity for the middle class and its anxieties because it's among all the classes we're the most vulnerable.
Yes.
I've often said that. I mean, the rich can buy their way out of anything.
Yeah.
They can buy their happiness. I mean, of course, many rich people are unhappy anyway. but they can buy themselves out of situations. They can buy medical care.
Mm-mm.
The poor have nothing to lose. They have nothing.
Poor have nothing to lose. Yeah.
We have lots of fantasies, aspirations, delusions. No, we keep thinking of going up. We keep thinking of going out there. Kaya sa atin, mawalan lang tayo ng kaunti. Malaking bagay na yan.
Almost. And we have the means. No, we have
means
some
up to a
measure
point.
of means.
Up to a point.
Yeah.
You know, it takes years for us to save some money, but one catastrophic illness wipes that out.
Yep.
You know, we get fired from our jobs.
You're on the street.
You're on the street. Kaya ang daling matibag ng mundo natin. Ang dali nating ma-disorient, ma-discombobulate. Kasi nga, natin, you know, we in a sense, we live on the knife's edge.
Yes.
Our politics vacillates.
Yes.
We're so easy to corrupt.
So it's easy for us to compromise.
Easy to compromise. And we can find the reasons for these compromises. You know,
because we're smart enough,
we're very facile,
educated enough to do it.
Yes, we're very facile.
Facile. That's the word.
Madali yan eh. Madali sa atin yan. Kaya I think it's this consciousness we've been blessed and cursed with. Yung alam mo yung nangyayari. And you know the consequences. And so that I think animates my writing, this consciousness of that vulnerability, that this carefully built facade, like this suit, this shirt, these pens,
Yeah,
those can vanish.
absolutely.
And it's that awareness that I think also drives us to keep writing and working while we can, because we're very aware of the finitude of things.
You're aware of the absurdity of things.
Oh, yes,
as well.
That too. I mean, our lives are full of ironies. Now you just have to suck in or suck up. And sometimes there's no explanations for them. Like, naging aktivista ako, but after nakulong ako sa martial law, what do I find but a government job? You know? Yung ganyan.
And for example, you wrote a great biography on an accountant who became one of the wealthiest,
Yes.
Filipinos, no?
Yes, I mean, I've written biographies about, sabi nga, communists, capitalists, and cronies.
Yeah. And without, you're not apologetic about it, no? It's something, in fact, that you're proud of, no? And you should be, no? So
I never apologize for something that I put my byline to. Otherwise, bakit ko pa ginawa yun?
That is, I think that's something that a lot of writers should learn, no? They seem to think that a writer should be poor, no? Or a writer should be, so politically charged that he will refuse to compromise, no?
Well, there's a point in life where compromise ceases to be a bad word, but a necessary one. The only question is, to what extent and what for? Which also raises the question of what is most important in life to you. And the answer to that will change as you move along.
Yes.
What was abstract at one point becomes very concrete, which is not to say that that it all comes down to the basics of daily life, because there's also a point in life, and I'm probably at that point, where abstractions matter more again, like free speech.
That's interesting. Huh?
And academic freedom. These are things I will actually go out on the street again for. I think it's important for every person and every writer to really establish what he or she is writing for. And I don't mean the people out there. I mean for you. What's your personal reason for doing this?
And I always had that feeling that you as a writer were writing for very personal reasons, no? As a writer in English, especially, no? A writer in English, meaning you have a very distinct audience. What then to you is the role of the writer in English, of the Filipino writer in English today?
For me, especially if we're writing in English, at this point in our literary history, it's really to be able to, I think, to share the Filipino experience with people out there. I mean, sharing it among ourselves is difficult enough and remains important. But since we're writing in English, we might as well also start thinking of writing for a bigger audience. And this has been my labor of sorts during these past few years that I was director of the Institute of Creative Writing, to raise the international profile of the Filipino writer. Because everybody else is out there, but we're not. And there are many reasons for that.
And the stories that we have, for example, Soledad Sisters talks about the OFW story, which is the Filipino story.
Which is the Filipino story, but there are many other Filipino stories we can share. I think it's really, in a sense, a retooling of our literary culture so that we begin to understand that it's important to write novels, for example, which we haven't really done.
Do you see the importance of the Filipino novel? Do you see that as
Yes, because that's really the only thing that international publishers look for.
So you see it as a pragmatic way.
This is not building for the future.
Okay.
I mean, if you're going to be a young
Because
Filipino,
you're aware that it's also a marketing sort of tool, no? The idea
Yes.
of a novel, di ba? Yeah.
yes, if you are a young Filipino writer in his or her mid-20s, still wondering about what to do, then my advice is think about writing the novel. Because if you want to leave a mark here and elsewhere, then that is probably the best contribution you can make. Because if we're just speaking about proving things, we've already proven that we're very fine writers of short fiction and of poetry. But the novel remains unconquered territory. Hindi lang naman matter of like, conquering, but knowing. It's just really just knowing the territory.
Oh, knowing the territory. But in fact, sometimes I feel that it's not a Filipino form na, in a way.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think we approach it with a certain awkwardness. It's like, and I've always felt that awkwardness, I must say.
But see, merely by looking at your output also, at one's output,
Oh.
makita mo na how you feel about it. Diba?
Because I wrote, I've written this long essay which I've delivered as a lecture titled Novelists in Progress. Because that's what we are. We are
It's an interesting...
we are two novel people. No, our writers, our best writers, really have produced little more than 2 novels. At least 2 known published ones.
Yes.
No? So you can count Rizal and Nick Joaquin, and
Yes.
of course with the glorious exception of Frankie Sonilose.
Yeah.
But everybody else that I know of, hanggang dalawang nobela lang eh. And then, parang, okay, yun na yun.
Oo, and ako, I'd like to attribute that to the fact that maybe the novel is not a Filipino form, no? In the sense that the Japanese no, will have long pieces of
Yes.
work, but they're really serialized stories, no? And not,
That's true.
no? Oo.
I mean, there must be a reason for that.
Yeah.
And in this lecture I titled Novelists in Progress, my kind of semi-serious answer to that is that novels, at least the classic novels, require for me a kind of view from the top of the mountain. But in this country, we don't have mountains.
Good point.
We're pedestrians.
Yes.
We're street
Street
level
level,
people, which is why, street level, close quarters, which is why the short story is
That's where stories happen.
is our ideal medium.
Yeah.
Ganyan. Close in, maikli lang.
Even
magaling
in our
tayo dyan.
movies, di ba? Ganun.
Yeah. Magaling tayo dyan. Isa pang dahilan dyan is that our template for the novel was created by Jose Rizal. Who to my mind is still our greatest novelist, by the way.
Yes, but Charles Ong himself said every time we write a novel, we proceed from Rizal,
Oh, nga.
which is either a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, because Rizal set that template for the Filipino novel, which must have a revolution in the background, a love story in the foreground, a cast of hundreds, and predictably, ayan, may mahirap, may mayaman, may pare, may kapitalista, may sundalo, so may estudyante, and then the returnee from abroad. So there you are.
In fact, in Rizal, what people remember from Rizal's novels are the short stories within the novels.
Yes,
Sisa.
that's true.
Diba?
It's the characters that emerge.
They don't remember the arc, not the novel, not as a novel.
Not as a novel, but yeah, fragments of it.
Yeah.
Ano? Si Elias, Doña
Yeah.
Victorina,
Yeah.
of course.
Das,
Basilio.
kumakain sila ng tinola. I mean, that's what they
Oo.
remember. These little short stories.
Yeah, it's the vignettes in the novel that really that people retain.
Yes.
But it's not the broad sweep of things. Kasi I think and that really speaks to our sense of history.
Yes.
We do not see the broad sweep of our history. No? Kaya kaya talaga gusto ko nang maging historian, but there's really no more time. Kaya
No more time.
I mean, yeah, I give myself, if I take care of myself reasonably well, I'll probably have about 10 productive years left. I really planned that out. I mean, how much can I accomplish within this time?
Sure.
Where should I go? I mean, literally, what places should I
It
visit?
seems that you've only started planning yourself out a few years ago because you've lived the drifter's life. It
Yeah.
seems.
But now that things have kind of surprisingly reached this point, this denouement.
Really?
Yeah, I can. I'm really thinking in terms of what I should be doing
Okay.
in my last 10 years, if God grants me even that. But I must say that I did have a full physical exam a couple of months,
And
a month ago.
How are things?
Surprisingly, everything
Works?
went well. I was so surprised. But of course, I can't sit on that. But still, I'm giving myself 10 years. How many novels are doable then?
Are you obsessed about the novel?
I think I have one or two more in me. There's one that's about halfway, it's been halfway through for the past 3-4 years.
Sure.
There's still this book of stories in my head that I want to write, really want to write. I mean, there's a scheme for it, but
Sure.
I have to sit down and do it. I have maybe about 5-6 commissioned books to get out of the way. I need to, so we're back into the nitty-gritty of writing for a living.
And you do this every day. I mean, you are an everyday writer.
Yes,
You are
every day.
A regimented writer. Like
Well, I don't have particular hours, but I squeeze in whatever I can, wherever.
okay.
Meaning I write at the back of the car, I write on the road.
Yeah, I know you're very tech savvy. You're,
I write on my phone because I have to. See, all of these are survival skills. I can't afford to wait for moods. If you're a professional writer, you have to learn to write, at the drop of a hat or like a faucet.
Yep.
And that's easy to do with most of the writing that I do anyway.
I suppose you learned that also during your years at the paper.
Yes, yes. But you really can't do that with fiction.
No.
Or good fiction anyway. That's when you have to wait for that certain hour or that moment, which often comes in the least likely of circumstances.
But and everybody knows this, but a Butch Dalisay story is always a damn good story. If you know what I mean. I mean, Franz Arceliana. Let's talk about Franz.
Yes.
I know his body of work, and
Yes.
there's some stories that simply don't work for me. Or that this is an off day for him. This is not his. How do you make a Butch Dalisay story? And you know what I mean. I mean, I'm sure you know what I mean
Because especially as I've grown older, and I've said this to my students, what I go for is is a story that will move my reader emotionally. And
So you have an audience in mind. You have a reader.
yeah, I have an intelligent reader in mind, but it's not his or her brain that I'm going for. I'm going for that reader's gut.
Boy. Yeah.
That's what I want. I mean, or maybe it's not the gut, but the heart. I want to reach that part of the person that I think many of us or many of our writers today kind of neglect, because so much of the writing that I come across today is clever. You know,
Clever is never a good word, no, when it comes to writing fiction. No?
Well, if you and I know what we mean, then that's true. That's true. But parang ayoko na doon sa, or it probably never was really my thing. Yung I want to dazzle you with. Pag young writer ka, you know,
I'll blow your mind.
Una vocabulary, and then you know, plotting or lalo na nung siyempre nauso yung magic realism, and you just want to pull one rabbit out of a hat after another.
Yeah.
Pero gusto ko kasi ang hinahabol ko yung tahimik na storya na biglang may konting boom, ganyan. Yung may iiwanan kang may tama eh. So ayan, makuha ko lang yun, masaya na ako.
Yeah, pero nakukuha mo lagi. Yan ang ano eh, no? I mean,
turo sa akin ni Boy yan eh.
I mean, it's okay if you can write one great book of short stories during a fantastic golden time in your life. But you managed to come out with it, you know. And I have to say this, right? Novel or no novel, your short stories alone, no, they stand as models of the Filipino short story because they capture the Filipino reality. They capture the Filipino reader's expectation of what a story is to them.
Oh, salamat.
No?
Malaking bagay sa akin
And
yan.
it's not, you know, it's in other words, they're very Filipino. No?
Yan, malaking bagay sa akin yan.
You know, you're not saying, read me to the global audience. Di ba? Parang ganun, no?
Because that's the way we're going to be read anyway. Una-una, by being Filipino. Using English.
That's what it is. What it is. It is what it is.
Alala ko yung sinabi ni NBN. I write in Filipino using English.
Yeah.
Ayan.
It is Filipino English. Di ba? Parang ganun, no?
You know, I just recently edited a book, an expanded collection of Argilla stories, which Annabelle is coming out with.
Nice.
So I had a chance to read practically everything published that he wrote. At doon talaga makikita mo rin of course, Argilla died very young at 33. Yes. So he was hardly at his midpoint.
Yes.
Pero makikita mo talaga doon yung how, in a sense, a writer who understands what writing is about keeps grasping for form and material.
Sure. It gets formed. No?
And over time, he finds it. But even in Argilla, you would think that Argilla began with like pastoral stories, and then when he went to the city, became more cosmopolitan. But actually, it wasn't so. His earliest story already brings the city to the countryside. It's about a backyard baseball game.
Wow.
You know, it takes place in, of course, back in Nagrib Khan, but it's a very cityfied story in a way.
Yeah.
Kaya it's also difficult to make assumptions about writers until I think you really study their work chronologically,
Sure.
and you see the person behind the prose developing and dealing with what life brings. Ganun.
But this is also where history comes into play, because for example, Argilia na nga, he grew up in the American, di ba, malakas yan no? You were after that, post-American years in that sense, no?
Yeah, but
And-
you can argue that the mid-1960s were just as, if not even more, Americanized than the 1940s.
Parang, this is all the post-war money coming in.
Oh,
No, yeah.
you know, and put me in LaSalle, and I mean, how much more American can you get? And where does this accent come from? Because we were dealing with Dick and Jane, you know, and
Hardy Boys.
Hardy Boys, and of course even the whole SRA thing was American. We were hardly dealing with Filipino reality in grade school. And this again was the dichotomy I had to deal with, and probably it's a good thing that I ran into this, because it's something that I would have to deal with for the rest of my life. This navigating between cultures and between classes, which is what we Filipinos, I think, are fated to do.
And that's a great substrate for any artist,
Yes.
to work on. But that said, let's bring it home to this generation for this last set of questions.
Sure.
To this generation where you can see that writers in English now, I don't know if you see it, but I certainly see it from my point of view, no, are not really as good at English now as they were a generation before.
Well, of course, they will argue back and say, who's to say
Who's to say?
what good English is? It's what we make it.
Of course, no. That's always the answer, no. But also, no. There seems to be a defensive reaction against making a direct line, calling tradition, no.
Well, I think it's a reluctance, or maybe even an ignorance of language itself as a medium of art. Para dito sa mga younger writers, posibleng it's just a facility. It's something to use. Yung laro doon sa lengguwahe mismo. Appreciating, for example, the prose of an Updike or a Somerset Maugham, and knowing how to describe a thing elegantly but efficiently.
And precisely.
And precisely. Yung mga ganyang qualifications, ewan ko kung that factors into how our younger writers use the language.
And it's not a generational thing in the sense, I mean, for example, in other parts of the world, literature carries on, no, as a driving force of cinema, for example.
Yes.
In our case, cinema has led the way,
Oh,
no? Sometimes I think it's because they don't have a language problem. They'll just speak with the, lingua franca na lang, no? And then you have a story, no? And the story takes precedence, of course, no?
oh.
Now, language has sort of dissociated itself,
Well, kasi nga, language, on the level of both language and generally speaking, and after having spoken about the novel, this is kind of strange to say, but people are moving towards the shorter forms.
Yeah.
We are of the 280 character tweet, where and of the hugot line.
Of the meme.
Of the meme. So the longer forms are really, in a sense, out of fashion. So people will say, why should I waste 3 paragraphs on describing this? when I can say it in like 3 sentences.
A prose writer would say, well, I should have wasted 7 hours
Yes.
reworking this paragraph
Yes.
that 100 people will read.
That's right.
Where I could use 3 hours to write a rom-com
That's right.
that people will say I'm a genius for writing it.
That's right.
No?
Although again, few people have those options naman to choose between this form and that and
Yeah.
and expect to do reasonably well.
Sure.
But I think it's really sad in a way that we have lost that sense of language itself as art or art medium at least na nagiging facility lang talaga or utility. And one more reason for that, of course, is that our younger writers haven't really read what we did,
Yeah.
and so lack for models to learn from.
Unlike in visual art, where nobody questions, for example, Bobby Chabet, for example, no? Ganun, no?
Oo, iba din siyempre ang lengguwahe ng art. And I must say, I'm fascinated by art.
Yeah.
Whenever I go abroad, one of the first things I run to is the
Museums.
art museum, and it's not just the traditional one. I love modern art, and I find modern art just as actually even more intriguing than traditional art. But again, I must say that in my creeping old age, as you see, I've surrounded myself with mid-century Philippine genre painting, which puts me in a peaceful place that allows me to dream and to think good things, because every art gallery you go to today, it's full of, and maybe it should be, full of dark and dreadful stuff.
Sure.
By dreadful, I mean producing dread.
Bad art.
Well, that too. There's some of that, but it's art that tells me what I already know. And I think art should always go beyond that.
But you're an angry writer pa rin. You remain an angry writer.
I don't know about that. I don't feel anger as much as regret or sadness. Yeah, I really must say that. I think I'm still angry at injustice. There's nothing that both angers and saddens me more than seeing a 10-year-old child working.
Yeah.
Ayan, doon talaga ako na doon dumudugo yung puso ko. Because that kid could have been me.
Yeah.
That kid should be reading.
Yeah.
That kid should be dreaming. But instead, he or she has to bring food to the table. Diyan ako nagagalit sa ano ba tong mundo natin na and yes, and I hope I don't lose that anger and just accept things as they are, because there's little I can do to change them. Kaya nga, that brings me back, and I suppose this brings us home to this idea of writing as a form of redemption or restitution. It's all we can do. It's all I can offer the world. Again, I'm someone who didn't expect to live beyond 25. So I've always called myself an articulate survivor.
How old are you now?
I'm going to be 65 in 3 months.
So you outlived yourself by 40 years,
Yes, yes. Surprisingly so. So every day has been a blessing. Kaya huwag sayangin ang panahon. Although I've always said that writing is just one way to happiness. And whatever that happiness is worth going for, as long as it doesn't mean the unhappiness of others. Si Boy Noriega nagturo sa akin yan eh. No, we would sit for many hours, long lunches, discussing what he had learned from drama school. You know, he was in the States to learn public policy, but he was actually also on the side learning drama, and he would share his lessons with me. And one day he told me, he concluded that, you know, all of his drama is really all about people just looking for happiness. And you know, that made an impression on me. Ano naman talaga habol natin eh. Sa pagsusulat, yung mga characters din natin, naman ang hinahanap lang nila. Pero napakahirap makarating dun eh. At this point in my life, I mean, I must say that, again, strangely enough, I've been very blessed and I am very happy for myself, for my family, but there's a lot around me to be unhappy about, and that's what we need to keep working on.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And on that note, no?
Yes,
I would
we're
like to
good.
be as happy as you one day.
Salamat.
Salamat, maraming
Salamat.
An honor, sir.
And he would go on for a few pages, not caring too much if so-and-so wished to be reminded of the darknesses of his or her distant past. The pen pushed him on to one word and another, creating a sudden and inescapable intimacy, less between himself and so-and-so, but between him and the paper. And he mailed these letters off almost as an afterthought, and at that with a twinge of sorrow, because he would never see them again. He was no calligrapher, and his script was somewhat crabbed, and his terminal G's and Y's had a tendency to spill over onto the next word. And he thought nothing of crossing out an offending word or line and writing on the margins. That was part of the whole game, to explore, to retreat and retrace one's steps, to leap here and tiptoe there, to fall into a pit and crawl out grinning. The finished page was a record of his ventures, mishaps and all. Perhaps he wanted them to see how he had triumphed in the end. 'Twas very truly yours, sis.